Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for Broadband Deployment News. So the FCC has announced some new ready to authorize funds that are going to be for RDOF, and they've also announced a new accountability program for rural broadband that I was going to make you aware of. So I will be right back. Thanks for joining me, Rick Uzzi here at Z-Quorum. So as I mentioned, FCC now has announced a bunch of new providers that are going to be getting funds through RDOF. These are people that have submitted their long-form applications, and they are now in what's called a ready-to-be authorized stage, so to speak. So they're kind of at the finish line. And also in what the FCC has announced is some new accountability measures that they're going to be taking to try to prevent to try to help these funds be used in the best possible way. So I'll be talking about both those things today. So we see here, this is the news announcement right here. FCC over 1.2 billion for rural broadband in 32 states. FCC announces over 1.2 billion through the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, that's RDOF, while adding new accountability and transparency measures. So that's another key item here. So RDOF, this is a reverse auction that was done where service providers, this money goes directly to service providers, they bid based on how much support they would be able to accept. They had to meet certain speed criteria, although they could bid for lower speeds and higher latency, or they could bid for 1 gig speeds and low latency, and there was a combination of those. And depending on what they decided they were going to bid on, that determined a certain weight that was added to their bid. So the FCC was trying to emphasize gig service, but they also want to make sure that if nobody wanted to bid on that there were people that could win with slower services and maybe a little higher latency. So that auction is over. A lot of people have bid on that. There are people that have been announced as winners, but now the FCC is going through all those applications and trying to figure out who really should be getting this money. So they announced these new funds here, 1.2 billion there, and this is the page for that. I'll go ahead and link to a lot of this stuff on the comments. So here's this is the press release. So again, they announced 1.2 billion while adding new accountability and transparency measures. I'll mention that here in a minute. New Rural Broadband Accountability Plan will increase audits, verifications, and transparency. So they've said they're ready to authorize more than 1.2 billion through the RDOF fund to new broadband deployments in 32 states. And the largest funding round to date. 23 broadband providers will bring broadband service to over 1 million locations. The Commission also has created the Rural Broadband Accountability Plan, a new effort to monitor and ensure compliance for universal service high cost programs, including RDOF. So here's a comment from the chairman of the FCC. Today's announcement means more connectivity is coming to consumers while we continue our commitment to make sure that funding goes to areas that truly need it, which is important. Changes and enhancements to existing audit and verification procedures include increasing audits and verifications of support recipients. So the number of audits and verifications will double in 2022 as compared to 2021, and include on-site audits as well as audits and verifications based upon random selection. Also increasing audits and verifications of large and higher risk support recipients. The largest dollar recipients will be subject to an on-site audit in at least one state, and higher risk recipients will be subject to additional audits and verifications. Both of those make me think of Starlink. One of them makes me think of LTD, which recently is also going to be mentioned here because they have defaulted on a ton of locations. I'm not sure if it's all of them, but certainly Starlink I would consider a higher risk one. I've talked about that in the past, and that they are, while they have a proven technology so far as in a limited rollout, it's not yet sure the kind of speeds people are going to be getting, and it's also not sure if their financial model will work over time, being as they have to launch a ton of satellites in a very short period of time in order to be able to meet the time frame here, and also replace satellites that over 5 years are going to be basically falling out of orbit at some point. So they are probably being, I'm thinking, addressed with this as well. So increasing program transparency. For the first time, results of verifications, audits, and speed latency performance testing will be made public on USAC's website. So one of the things that CAF2 and RDOF have in it are speed tests and latency test that the service providers have to do. So they have to have a certain number of households that they test. I think it's once a quarter, just for some week of that time frame that they have to select, and then they have to go out and do this testing and send that data to these various points. They have to test to a specific place, and then they send that data to the FCC, and it's got to meet obviously what they are committing to do right there. With today's sixth funding wave, the Commission has now announced over $4 billion in funding to winning bidders for new deployments. Over the past year, the Commission has taken a number of actions to strengthen its oversight of the program, including sending letters to 197 applicants concerning areas where there was evidence of existing service or questions of waste. Some of that had to do with their maps, frankly, because they provided just a list of census blocks to people and said, okay, here you go. Here's the list of census blocks that you can bid on. And some of those were parking lots and airports and those kinds of things. So that was brought to their attention. So they sent letters to 197 applicants and said, hey, you may want to rethink this. And if you do rethink this and don't want to bid there, you can let us know, and we will not fine you, or there will be no penalty for that. Bidders have already chosen not to pursue support in approximately 5,000 census blocks in response to the Commission's letters, and I'm sure they were happy to do that once they get out of that, once they realize what the particular property was maybe, or that there could be a fine pending. Denying waivers for winning bidders that have not made appropriate efforts to secure state approvals or prosecute their applications. These bidders would have otherwise received approximately $350 million. Publishing a list of areas where providers had defaulted, thereby making those places available for other broadband funding opportunities. So anytime somebody defaults on this, then even though the auction is done, those areas are now available for funding. I'm not sure the process of that. I need to look into that. And then conducting an exhaustive technical, financial, and legal review of all winning bidders. And that was something that they really were required to do under this, is that when somebody fills out their long-form application, they need to be providing specific technical information about how they're going to accomplish this. They need to provide their financials. I think it was for maybe 3 or 5 years. The legal review of the contract, all of that needed to be done. So they're just basically saying they've been doing this over that time. This is the public notice. I'm not going to read much of this at all. So Rural Digital Opportunity Fund support, ready to be authorized. It just kind of gives you an idea of what the difference is between ready to authorize and authorize. So listed auction 904 long form applicants must submit letters of credit and bankruptcy code option letters by Friday, February the 11th, 2022. They say we've reviewed the long form applications associated with each of the winning bids identified in Attachment A. These applications were reviewed to determine whether they met all legal, financial, and technical requirements. So just like I was saying there, as part of what they're saying they've been doing, that's what they're doing right here. Based on the representations and certifications in each relevant long-form application, we are prepared to authorize support, subject to submission of the required letters of credit and bankruptcy code opinion letters for each of the winning bids. So they say they're prepared to authorize support, and generally as they've made these announcements, they have this prepared to authorize support, which kind of notifies everybody, okay, we're prepared to do this. Then the folks have time to get those final items in place, and then not long after, a week or two after, they have the we are now actually going to be authorizing you. I don't think there was anything in here else. So I forget what time I think it was, well, we saw the date. I think they have it by like 6 o'clock on that day of February 11th, 2022. I thought I'd highlighted that, but I guess not. And what do we have here next? So these are the ready to authorize. So these are the ones that were just ready to authorize. So you can see there's a ton of them here, and these are each by census block groups and census, I guess this is by census block groups and number of locations and whatnot. So you can see right here, just from the corner here, how long this document is. So you got Beacon, you got Bright House. There's some big names on here. Charter. Oh yeah, Charter. So I did a broadcast the other day about Charter having rolled out their first RDOF location in Texas. And they actually did that without knowing for sure that they had the funds yet. And I don't know if this is one of the areas that they are now, like you see Alabama here, they've got a bunch of locations that they are good for. So they actually rolled it out before finding out that they were authorized. Maybe they had gotten a hint of it, or they were just like, we're just going to move ahead. They were going to do it anyway. You see Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, I don't know if I saw Texas, Honey, Missouri, Tennessee. Sorry, this might be making you dizzy or nauseous. Wisconsin. So I don't know if I saw Texas on there. So that's interesting. I think it was, where was it in Texas? I can't remember, but anyway, so they rolled it out. They rolled out their RDOF funds in Texas, and they maybe have not actually been approved for the funds yet. So maybe that'll be on the next list that are ready to authorize, and then they'll get approved for that. So you can see a bunch on here. Who else was on here? I saw Time Warner had a bunch too, I think. You got Charter, FiberLink, all Charter, FiberLink. You can see the ton of those. FiberLight, Imagine Networks, Pearl River, and then, yeah, Time Warner. Time Warner Cable got a bunch of awards here, so they are now ready to be authorized. So you see there's some, not just some smaller providers getting RDOF or some rural providers, but you got these big MSOs that are in there that are getting money, which, it's good. I mean, they'll be using those funds, hopefully, well, definitely, to expand broadband in that area. And again, they're going to be having to do testing for this and documenting that the people are getting the speeds that they are claiming they're going to be providing. And that won't be hard with cable. They can certainly do that. Here we've got the Auction 904 site. This is the RDOF site. I just want to point out a couple of things on here. So on this site, I'll link to this as well. You've got your authorized Auction 904 form applicants, updated 114. So these are people that actually authorized. Then you've got your ready to authorize. That would include the ones that I was talking about today. So there's spreadsheets for both of those that you can download. And then there's census blocks covered by Auction 904 defaults on here that you could download as well. So these would be the people that have defaulted, and all of the census blocks that are available for, I guess, for another bid, or I don't know if the FCC contacts the second place winner, or if anybody can jump in there. I'm going to try to find that out, and I'll do a broadcast about that. But as one example, LTD Broadband was the largest winner in RDOF. They had won $1.3 billion, 528,000 locations, over 15 states. And there was a lot of pushback on that because a lot of people said, they're going to be planning on doing a lot of this with wireless. And a lot of people said they don't have the technical expertise to do this. And apparently they defaulted on a lot of the applications. They're blaming on their attorney for that, I think. They defaulted on a lot of the applications. So they are a huge block of people that were just in this recent list of defaults. So it looks like their bids have been taken off the table. So there's a whole bunch of census blocks now available that, largest bidder here that are now in default. Notably, who was not on here is on either, both the ready to authorize or this, the ones that are defaulted on, was Starlink. I've talked about that in the past. They are, and I mentioned earlier here that I think the FCC is taking a really close look at them because a lot of people complained because unlike a provider that gets funds and then says, okay, now I'm going to go ahead and spend this money on getting fiber rolled out in these particular areas and make that available. They've got a lot of construction costs. Somebody like Starlink, they've got satellites up there, so they don't really need to do anything infrastructure-wise. Their satellites can only handle so much bandwidth. So the satellites up there, that's why they bid on a lot of different areas that they just look for areas on the map and said, okay, we'll bid here, 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 and here. And they did bid on places that were parking lots and airports and things like that where there was no broadband but not needed. And now there have been a lot of stories out recently that their speeds have been declining. They in certain areas they've declined below the 100 megabit per second threshold there for some of these funds, as well as there's a question as to whether they'll be able to get enough satellites up in the air in order to be able to service not just the people that are getting RDOF, but if they do that, if they try to service people other than RDOF, then they won't be able to make this. So people like the Fiber Broadband Association and NTCA, I think they put together, I talked about this, they put together a paper that went through all of these things and sent it to the FCC. So the FCC, I'm sure, is looking at that. So they've made no decision, it looks like, yet about Starlink. And I will be surprised if Starlink is allowed to maintain the bids that they've won or to be able to move forward with the bids that they've won, unless it's in a very hard to reach location, somewhere that either nobody bid on it, nobody else bid on it because it's really, really expensive, or some other reason that it would be really specifically a good use case for satellites. So that would be my guess as to what's coming with that. There's also on this site, as I mentioned, you've got your ready to authorize. So I just went ahead and downloaded that. And you can see on here, again, you've got a bunch of people on here. This is by the, which one is this? This is by the state level summary. So you can see the state level summary of who's won what, and you can sort by that. You've also got down here census blocks. So this is where you've got just a ton of information with each census block. These are the ones that are ready to authorize. There's a very similar spreadsheet on those that have defaulted, so you can download that as well. So lots going on with broadband funding and deployment as usual. So thanks for joining me, and I hope this was helpful. If it was, go ahead and give me a like on the video. If you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button, click the little bell, and when you click the bell, you will be notified when I'm live. So, and that would be for either Broadband Deployment News or Tech Tuesday. Thanks again for joining me. I appreciate that, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.